All right, welcome into Yappy Time with Eric. Today, we're going to talk about the medieval period. This is for Dr. Ryckman and my High Middle Ages class. For our final project, I was told to make a YouTube video talking about one of my favorite things that I learned or what intrigued me the most during this class. And the thing that intrigued me the most, in fact, was what we first learned about in the class was the three orders. In the medieval period, you had the three orders were those who pray, those who work, and those who fight. And for some reason, this caught my eye. I was so bought into there being this super caste system like uh, order in the medieval period, just how I thought I was taught growing up. But in fact, it's thought put into those three categories that makes it what it is. And those who pray, of course, being the papacy, such as the monks. You got the Pope, those in the church, those who fight, those that are warriors that are fighting for the kingdom, and those who work, such as farmers and those lower middle class people who got to work for everything they have. And I did some research and I was wondering how it got started. And I was told that I saw that what happened is it's not something you found in the Bible or in other sources. It comes from somebody who makes short reference to the Romans having divided themselves into the three groups. In this case, it being the senators, the soldiers, and the plebeians. Um, that was Isidore of Seville, who said he was an encyclopedia writer in the 17th century, who said this about the Romans in the medieval period. It seemed that the first reference to the orders, it was a thing of philosophy that was brought to us, that we were told you had the people that work, the people that pray, and the people that fight. And these people are kind of not kept away from each other, but kind of separated themselves from each other because not that they had any beef, but they all wanted to go over and do their own thing. And they were so committed to that one thing that they thought that this would be the best case scenario. You have, when you look at all the three orders, you have the different stages of these orders. I'm going to start with the ones who pray. When you look at the ones who pray, you have your monks, your popes. You're those who are faithful to God, and their whole purpose in life is to give back to God and to spread the word. Or in the medieval period, force you to love God, and if you didn't, they might kill you. But according to this, to my notes, it says that around the same time of the Roman Empire, the idea that three orders were reemerging in France as well. Somebody named Bishop Adalberto of Leon wrote this explanation about dividing the three orders. The community of the faithful is a single body, but the condition of society is threefold in order. For the human law distinguishes two classes, nobles and serfs, indeed, are not governed by the same ordinance. The former are warriors and the protectors of the churches. They are defenders of people, of both great and small, in short, of everyone, and at the same time they ensure their own safety. The other class is that of the serfs. This luckless breed possesses nothing except at the cost of its own labor. Who could, reckoning with an abacus, add up the sum of the cares with which the peasants are occupied, of their journeys on foot, of their hard labors, The serfs provide money, clothes, and food for the rest. No free man could exist without serfs. Is there a task to be done? Does anyone want to put himself out? You have your those who pray. You have your monks and your papacy, the ones that are fighting against the devil, the ones that are trying to get to heaven, the ones that are studying the Bible or the different scriptures every day to get themselves where they need to be with God. You got those who work. This class was looked down upon, as told by Alberto of Leon. This luckless breed possesses nothing except at the cost of its own labor. They possess nothing. Even told by this was in 1020 that they were looked down upon because of them having to work to get what they needed, them having to work to get where they could be, to hopefully one day not have to work anymore, even though they knew that this was probably not an option and they would be working the rest of their lives. It also tells them, he also says that they provide money, clothes, and food for the rest, and no free man could exist without serfs. No free man could exist without serfs is very telling that although they were looked down upon, they had this sense of respect. They had this sense of nobility that they could be counted upon at any time because even though they were at the bottom, they could be seen as the most important class or order of all three of these. They worked for everything, and they provided not only to themselves, but they provided for others as well. You had your vendors, you had your farmers. Your farmers specifically, they worked every day, rain or shine, hot or cold, no matter the time of the year or the place. If they could do it, they would be out there providing meat from cattle or horses at that time, pigs, other animals, providing vegetables and fruit from their gardens that they made, providing all these different goods that were absolutely needed in order to become a society, a functional society, because without the food, they would starve. Without the vegetables, they wouldn't get the nutrients they needed. Without them doing all these things, without them having pigs, you couldn't get the fat to go into other goods that were vitally needed in this situation. Animals were a huge part of the society back in the medieval period, and this is just a way of showing how important the farmers were. And me being raised up on a farm, it's just it just kind of makes me proud of who we are as a family of farmers coming together and working hard throughout everything they could have to provide everything that we have. Us on the farm, we do beef cattle. We sell our cattle. They go off to market, and we provide meat for those in the markets, such as Kroger and Walmart. Um, it's overwhelming. It's humbling because they were shown that they weren't. Um, they were considered the bottom. They were considered luckless, and they didn't have a choice but to labor. They didn't have a choice but to work hard for their entire life, and they couldn't help but overcome what was being said in that time because they had to provide. They understood that there was no turning back. They couldn't just find gold in the ground and go live their life. They had, without worry, they had to work for what they got. And it was very appreciative when looking at this to see that even though the farmers were looked upon as like the bottom of the order, they were also seen as one of the most important, if not the most important, of the classes. You see kings, a lot of times they hired servants, or they hired servants just for the work, also seen as slaves. But they hired servants just for the work because a lot of the times they would go to the farmers or to the working class because they knew they grew up having to work for all they had, and you knew they were going to work hard to get what they could. He continued, Alberto of Leon continues to say, we see kings and prelates make themselves the serfs of their serfs. The master who claims to feed his serf is fed by him, and the serf who never sees an end to his tears and his sighs. God's house, which we think of as one, is thus divided into three. Some pray, others fight, yet others work. The three groups which coexist cannot bear to be separated. The services rendered by one are a precondition of for the labors of the two others. Each in his turn takes it upon himself to relive the whole. Thus the threefold assembly is nonetheless united, and it is thus that law has been able to triumph, and that the world has been able to enjoy peace. I mean, it's kind of just speaks for itself as what's going on here. This is in 1020 when it's written, and you see that even though some are looked down on more than others, that they can't coexist without each other. You have the monks who provide, or you have those who pray that provide a sense of faith and a sense to know that that everybody isn't just living for no reason. You have those who work, as I mentioned earlier, those who just provide all the goods needed to the world, to the society, to make it a functional society. And then you have those who fight. As someone who's never been in the military, but having friends and family members that have grown up in the military, I've often seen that those people are looked upon with more respect. I often treat those with the uniform on or with the hat on as those who are I look up to. I always try and thank them for the service because that is no small task. Those who fight do exactly that, and not only do they fight, they are willing to give up their lives to protect the society that they are in. They're willing to protect the society that, whether they have been treated well or not well, they have taken this opportunity to give their own life to fight for a better cause. And that better cause was a sense of freedom in the medieval ages, but not really free, but pretty much. Anyways, you have all these different you have these three different orders, and without any one of them, it would be impossible to function without the other. Without any one of them, none of these classes would exist. In fact, the medieval period would just be a bunch of famine or hopelessness or people getting overran, and the Roman Empire probably still running wild today without all these different orders that you have. You see, whenever I think about the serfs and this order, it's often putting the fighters and the workers together. But you can also kind of create a Venn diagram in your head of the three and what each one has in common with each other while also being separate from another. Where your fighters, your workers, they both have their differences. The workers work, obviously. Come on now, Aaron, let's get it real. The fighters fight, once again, duh. But when you cross that little Venn diagram right there and you look at what similarities they have between them, it's just a huge difference it's not a huge difference. Aaron, you're sitting literally comparing them. it's such similar activities because they're both giving a part of their life to work for a better cause, whether they can afford to do that or not. I said earlier, the workers couldn't afford to do it. They had to work for what they got. If they didn't, they'd go hungry and they'd be poor and they'd have no one to live off of. They wouldn't be able to do anything and they'd be out on the street. But they worked and they provided a good. The fighters, most of the time, they were a little more wealthy and could afford a little bit more, not too terribly much, but a little bit more to overcome. But they gave their lives, some of them, and at least put their lives on the line to fight for the greater good, and that being to make a functional society last forever. When you look at the fight and the prey, you obviously, they look like they're two completely different archetypes of people here. You have your fighters and your prayers. But whenever you hook that Venn diagram together, you see that even though they look so different, they're all fighting for a hope. A hope to be free on the fighter's side, and a hope to go to heaven in the prayer's side. And they're putting that together to have that hope and sense of relief that they've accomplished something. And whether they've accomplished something or not, it may not be known to them as well. Because when you die as a prayer, whether you think you know or don't, you don't know because you're dead. You ain't breathing. You don't know if you're in heaven or not. You don't know if you've made it or not until judgment. When you're a fighter and you die on the battlefield, you could have done all that for nothing. You could have got ran through and they wouldn't have thought anything about it. But you know, you're doing it anyways. It's very noble to look at those people and think, the fighters specifically, and think that some of them died without knowing if they won freedom or lost freedom, or won and protected their land, or lost and protected and didn't protect their land and got pillaged by the Roman Empire, which could very well be the case because, let's be real here, they kind of ran through everybody and were the most powerful thing in the world for many, many, many years. But anyways, back to the Venn diagram talk. When you look at when you look at the pray and work, as somebody who does find himself as a man of faith, that in the Bible it says faith by works is how you achieve salvation. You've got to work to get to your faith. You can't just say you're going to heaven and don't do anything about it. The prayers have to work. They have to study. They have to put in hours and hours of intense commitment to what they had to get to where they could be today. They have to get to their end goal, which is heaven, by working. They can't just sit there and say, oh, I'm going to heaven, and just sit there, have a jolly old time, then go sit back, drink a glass of wine or whatever they drank back in the day. I don't really know. Don't think they had Cokes, but if they did, good for them. They could drink them a Coke. And just sit back, chug their Coke, and get on with their life. But they can't. They have to work and achieve their salvation through these different acts of evangelizing and telling people forcefully or unforcefully that there is a way to go to heaven and they need to do this to get there. And when you look at the middle Venn diagram and you see what all three of them have in common, I slightly mentioned it whenever I was talking about working and praying. Commitment. They all have to put in their commitment into the world or into their society to make each one of them work. If they had a problem with one another, they couldn't just say, "Oh, I'm done with you. I'm not going to rely on you anymore," and just dip out. They have to work it out. They have to work together because they're like a well-functioning, well-oiled machine. They gotta just go, whether they wanted to or not, whether they agreed or not. And I'll tell you right now, they didn't agree a lot. They didn't always agree. When you look at as we talked about through all the class this year, when there was always a divide between kingdom and the church, meaning that most of the fighters were part of the kingdom side, and most of the church, the prayers were, obviously church people. Didn't agree a lot, whether they said they did or they didn't. They really didn't. As seen through many different texts that we've read throughout the year. But they had to be committed to the cause. They had to be into what they were wanting to be into. And without this commitment, nothing would have ever worked in the functional society that we see as the Middle Ages. Well, whether it's functioning or not, that's one thing. But anyways, this society that we see as the Middle Ages throughout all the different texts that we've read would not have been a thing without the three orders, which is the workers, the prayers, and the fighters. Shout out to medievalist.net for providing me the reading of Alberto of Leon for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave it a like, subscribe. I ain't gonna be back.